Dear viewers, this is part 1 on the 3-part series on overweight. For the other videos, see Prescribon Medical Education series Overweight. See related video on food balance in Prescribon Medical Education series 2-part series on food balance. This figure shows the structure of an adipocyte, which is the fundamental cell in the fat tissue. The structure of adipocyte is shown in this figure. This cell is between 20 and 300 micrometer in diameter. It has a cell nucleus and the border is surrounded by a cellular membrane. It has cytoplasm, endoplasmic reticulum, EPR, mitochondria and Golgi apparatus surrounding a fat droplet. Overweight. We have earlier seen the figure adipocyte, which is central to the fat tissue. An average human adult has 30 billion fat cells with a weight of 13.5 kilogram. Each adipocyte is between 20 and 300 micrometer in diameter. Its parts are nucleus, cytoplasm, endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus and fat droplet. The endoplasmic reticulum is a large dynamic structure that serves many roles in the cell, including calcium storage, protein synthesis and lipid metabolism. Mitochondria is a double membrane bound organelle in the cell. Its uses are in aerobic respiration to generate most of the cell's supply of adenosine triphosphate, ATP, which is a source of chemical energy. Golgi apparatus. This is otherwise known as Golgi complex, functions as a factory in which proteins received from the endoplasmic reticulum are further processed and stored, sorted for transport to their eventual destinations, that is either lysosomes, the plasma membrane or secretion. Adipose tissue, the fat tissue, evolved as a solution to the challenge of the intermittent availability of food. At times when food is plentiful, excess calories, that is food, are converted into triglycerides and efficiently stored in the lipid droplets that occupy most of the volume of fat cells. When needed, the triglyceride is rapidly broken down to free fatty acids and glycerol, which provide an energy source to other sites throughout the body. However, in environments where food is abundantly available and when individuals tend to be sedentary, the chronic excess of energy intake over expenditure leads to obesity. Individual variation. The risks of becoming obese under those circumstances and of developing the illnesses associated with obesity vary greatly between individuals. This is mainly due to a strong genetic basis. The extent to which different adipose deposits expand in response to chronic overnutrition varies markedly between people. In general, females store more fat in subcutaneous tissue, especially on buttocks, thighs and upper arms, whereas men are more prone to store fat in intra-abdominal and truncal subcutaneous sites. Dear listeners, by the way, this educational video is made possible by Prescribon, the makers of e-prescription software for digital prescriptions, available freely for doctors on the website www.prescribon.com. Doctors who are interested in this e-prescription can freely avail of its vast collection of more than 100,000 e-prescriptions. Global burden of overweight. Obesity is increasing throughout the world and particularly in low and middle income countries. Obesity has nearly tripled worldwide since 1975. In 2016, more than 1.9 billion adults aged more than 18 years old were overweight. Of these, more than 650 million were obese. Adolescents are particularly at high risk. 39% of adults aged more than 18 years old were overweight in 2016 and 13% were obese. In 2016, 340 million children and adolescents aged 5 and 15 were overweight or obese. 38 million children under the age of 5 were overweight or obese. The number of overweight children are increasing throughout the world. In US, China, Brazil, India, Mexico, and Nigeria. 40 million children younger than 5 years are overweight. The prevalence of obesity in children are increasing throughout the world. The prevalence of obesity in children and adults in the United States and in many other industrialized countries is rapidly increasing, rising by more than 30% during the past decade. Approximately 70% of adults aged 20 and over in the United States are overweight or obese, and more than 35% of those adults are obese. Most of the world's population lives in countries where overweight and obesity kills more people than underweight. The increased prevalence of obesity is due to changes in dietary pattern, that is, increase in animal food consumption, physical activity, that is, increased use of motorized vehicles, and sedentary occupations which are higher paying as compared to lower paying hard work related occupations. Body Mass Index (BMI). BMI is a measure of body fat based on a person's weight in kilograms divided by the person's height in meters, which is squared. That is, weight in kilograms by height in meters squared. BMI less than 18.5 is underweight. Between 18.5 to 24.9 healthy range. Between 25 and 29.9 is overweight. Above 30 means obese. The adverse impact of obesity on the risk for various disorders appears to be more closely associated with increased visceral, that is, abdominal adiposity, than with increased subcutaneous fat storage or storage of fat in the lower parts of the body, such as hips. Therefore, many clinicians measure waist circumference as indicators of abdominal obesity. The waist to hip ratio. It is a simple but useful measure of fat distribution. The waist-hip ratio is calculated by dividing your waist measurement by your hip measurement, since the hips are the widest part of your buttocks. The formula is WHR, that is waist-hip ratio, is waist circumference by hip circumference. A waist-hip ratio of greater than 0.9 in men and 0.85 in women is considered to indicate abdominal obesity in adults. The physiology of nutrient storage in adipose tissue. When energy intake exceeds energy expenditure, a small amount of that excess energy is stored as glycogen in liver and skeletal muscle. But if the imbalance is greater, then our bodies are designed to store that excess energy in a more efficient way as triacylglycerol, that is triglyceride. This fat is more efficient because, unlike glycogen, it does not need accompanying water, and when metabolized, it generates almost 3 times more energy per gram than does carbohydrate. Adipocytes. See the earlier figure of adipocyte. Adipocytes, that is fat cells, that is white adipocytes, have evolved to contain a highly specialized organelle, the unilocular fat droplet, which holds the triglyceride within a single layer of phospholipid that contains all the components needed for enzymes that make and break down triglycerides in a manner that is rapidly responsive to metabolic requirements. No other type of cell is specifically designed to store fat safely in this manner, and many of these adverse consequences of obesity are likely caused not by having too much fat in adipocytes but by so called non professional cells being forced to take up and store fat. Some new fat cells can be made in adulthood when around 10% of our fat cell population turns over every year. Note, there are two general classes of adipocytes: white adipocytes, which store energy as a single large lipid droplet and have important endocrine functions. They have low mitochondrial density. Brown adipocytes store energy in multiple small lipid droplets, but specifically for use as fuel to generate body heat, that is thermogenesis. They have high mitochondrial density. Environmental factors predisposing to obesity. Obesity cannot exist in the absence of sufficient food to lay down and maintain excess fat stores. Nowadays, food is abundant and available everywhere. Only 100 years before, the next day's food was not available in an household. So, the principal cause of obesity must be either the obese person's ignorance of the role of excess caloric intake or their conscious choice to prioritize the immediate pleasures of eating over the long term health harms associated with obesity. The body needs very little food, far less than our current thinking about the requisite quantity of food required for our present day's needs and satisfy genuine hunger. Also, food, especially high calorie food, happens to be our cheapest, that is, financially cheapest, method of indulging ourselves in pleasure. Name any other thing, be it clothes, accessories, car, or buying a home, all are far more costlier. Furthermore, we are generally unaware that our helpless bodies are being burdened with extra food at the least excuse, be it by ourselves, mothers, wives, other close relatives, friends, business meetings, and social gatherings. We are also forgetting that our poor bodies have no way of getting rid of the extra and unnecessary food that we swallowed for various reasons other than genuine hunger, except by storing it away in the fat cells of the body. But it is everyone's fond desire that this extra food, inadvertently swallowed, be thrown out in the feces, urine, or sweat. But alas, the human body is not designed that way, because all along, throughout the history of mankind, the main worry staring at human beings was lack of food, and food hunting was the main occupation because food was scarce. There is a real discrimination against obese people in society. It is clear that genetic factors are important in an individual's predisposition to obesity, but it cannot explain the marked increase in obesity prevalence that has occurred in the past few decades. We have to look to an environment that has become increasingly obesogenic to explain that phenomenon. In most developed and developing countries, energy dense and highly palatable food, an irresistible combination of fat, sugar, and salt with flavorings in proper proportions, and beverages have been aggressively marketed made cheaper than ever before, provided in larger portions, and made available ubiquitously and continuously. This has been combined with a reduction in physical activity in work and domestic life due to mechanization and the change in the nature of employment. Diets today are richer in fat and lower in carbohydrates, resulting in higher energy intake. Fat 9 calories per gram, carbohydrates or sugar 4 calories per gram. Blue collar workers are generally paid higher than the workers who have to do more manual labor. Walking from home to workplace is not the norm today as previously due to various practical reasons. Various household chores have been mechanized with the advent of fridges, mixies, rice grinders, and so on. Even the control of our external temperature by artificial heating and cooling has meant less energy expended on thermoregulation by our bodies. So, dear viewers, this is the end of part 1 in this series. Thank you for watching. For the other videos in this series, see Prescribon Medical Education 3-part series on overweight.